I tried to do like a consulting or a coaching group maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was super disappointed because they weren't very big. But this was one good thing they had was a big data set of people that were in their club. So it's good to know like what good looks like, what average looks like. Most residential repaint contractors that I've seen across the nation are operating single-digit percentage points. So that's after the owner, quote unquote, pays himself, the company truly nets in the single digits. Residential repaint, this is kind of like typically people will typically be at 40% labor, 15% materials, which just gets you a 45% contribution margin. Nick and I actually, we did a lot of heavy lifting, but this morning we broke out kind of what a company looks like on the overhead standpoint to get you to 20% net. And I was thinking it'd be fun to work through, is this actually real? And again, the average labor burden in residential repaint, according to APC magazine, is about $21 an hour. That'd be with your payroll taxes, and that's per estimated hour.
And so this is, we should say that different from just labor, because payroll is one thing, but then there's payroll tax, and then the burden is all the extra stuff that comes with employing a person. So if you pay somebody 17 or 18 bucks an hour, the real cost of employing that person per hour is probably closer to 21 or 22,
yeah.
somewhere in there.
The two variable costs will be your unemployment insurance and your workers' comp. Those are, everything else is set by the government. You've got your FICA, your SUDA, your national, your state taxes, but your unemployment is variable, and that's why you don't want to have those happen. Because you like that percentage to be low on payroll, and then your workers' comp is variable too. That's another reason why you don't want to have those claims, because those can change big numbers pretty quick.
Jason, $21 is include workman's comp?
Yeah. Yep. So that's where you'd say, and this is a good number to your painters, like, listen, you are a superb painter, right? The average painter should burden at $21 an hour, right? So if you'd like to make $42 an hour, you'd be twice as fast as an average painter, right? And that's where you can start having some of these conversations. And we do open book management at Paris Painting, where it's kind of, here's how the business operates, here's our profit target, you help us get there and you're rewarded accordingly, right? So you look at $21 an hour and you say, is this even realistic, right? Well, yeah, if your gross charge is 52, I'd say that's super realistic. I don't know what you guys are seeing in the market, but we've raised our prices pretty much every quarter for the last 6 quarters, and it hasn't affected the SR too much.
Success ratio with.
Yeah, like kill rate with bids, right? So you say, oh, like what? So I don't know. Does this seem like a realistic charge rate from what you guys are seeing in your personal experience?
On the bottom, I'd say I try to go between 50 and 80, depending on location and who I'm doing it to.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like it's super realistic. I guess that's something I'd like to get out too, is just so you guys know, like, you're not charging too high. I remember when I first started, I was at $35 an hour labor, and the same number of people told me that my numbers were too high as now. Right now we're at $63 an hour labor, and that's like what the market I think bears when you're professional service. It will bear a lot more than you guys think. It's just basically what I wanted to say.
Well, I'm sure you're not the only one in the room too. I think I have the same number of people in a week tell me I'm too high as tell me that I was the lowest number they got.
Head crash again, yeah. It's
So it's
trying
like,
to figure out,
okay.
we've all been on that string of estimates. You have 3 estimates in a night. Everyone tells you you're too high. All of a sudden you go home, you're like, all right, I got to redo everything, and it's like, well, hold on, if it's metric based, you're good. So.
Yeah, sweeping policy changes are not meant to make off emotions. That's like a political misnomer, I think, is when sweeping policy decisions get made off emotions. She made off of data, right? So RSR is 55%. When somebody tells us we're too high, well, we sell 55% of our jobs. I don't think we're too high. And we do a lot of them. Right? We do 800 projects a year. We're probably not too high. We're probably right what the market bears. But if you didn't know your numbers, you didn't have that perspective, you'd be like, oh, my feelings are so hurt. They told me I'm too high. Maybe I should lower my price. Then you start lowering your price, then you don't have a profit, and you can't run your business the way it needs to run. You're going to ask make a comment?
Yeah, I just think that sometimes it's, you know you're winning when you lose somebody, when you just say, forget it, I'm not doing that work.
Yeah.
You know you're winning when you can just walk away from a job and go, you know, you're crazy, you want to, 20,000.
Yeah, if
And
you-
you actually send it back to them, these are the real costs of doing your job. Do you want somebody in that's truthfully making $6 an hour painting your property?
Yeah,
And
I
if you
think
do,
Sher-
you're not my customer.
Yeah, Sherwin had a great stat, 80% of painting businesses go out of business in 5 years. So just know that there's always a segment of the market that's bidding out of business prices, right? There's always a segment that's gonna continue, and our industry is very unique in that it's such a low barrier. That's something if you take a step back and really look at painting, it is a low barrier, and it's unique to other industries in that. There's like a continual churn of out of business pricing that exists in the market. And just be aware of that. And it's just a numbers game. Say, I'm gonna lose, what were we saying? You're gonna lose, there's like a third of business that you'll never get. You're always gonna be too high, they don't like your face. There's a third of the business you could show up with a bag of dog poop and they buy from you. They just love you, they love painting, they're not price conscious. It's that third that you really are fighting for in your sales process. And just have that mindset of, okay, check the box, this is one of those numbers that I'm just not gonna get, right? Whether it's pricing, scheduling, style that you run your business, whatever it may be. So these are a couple numbers I wanted to get out to the group in case you haven't heard. And some of these, I think 40% is a good labor percentage, 15% materials is a good number. When I heard about industry standards, I was thinking, we kind of talked to put it towards this route, but I was thinking also just production rates. That's something that I think is helpful when people bid their projects, and it's maybe it's a tightly held secret among some people, but for me, we're a pretty open book. I don't know if we want to dig into production rates and bidding, or just stay on business topic.
I'll provide a little context here, and then so we know what. So we'll show you how we kind of use these things. So 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, you know, there's your checkbook, which is a good sort of, you know, rating for how your business is doing, but it ebbs and flows and it comes and goes, and sometimes you don't exactly know. So about 4 years ago, when I started asking about what should a painting company look like, a whole bunch of people sort of gave me the percentages, and they all basically danced around this industry average. And so what I use it for is not necessarily this is what you must be, but if you just think about industry benchmarks and averages as just the average, and if you're lower than that, is it for a reason? If you're higher than that, is it for a reason? It can sometimes give you the pulse of your business, and that's what I use it for. And the other thing we should say too is that you always have to ask a series of very pointed questions when you talk to other painters about this stuff, because guys will come out there and say, I make 38% net profit a year. And it's like, you got a lot of questions behind those numbers, because when I first did this, my numbers were way lower than everybody else I talked to. And so far, so that I thought, I am a big failure in this. Turns out that we weren't all talking about the same thing. So people be crazy. When I talk to people, they don't use the same numbers in calculating all
I
this.
think the most classic one is how many guys are you running, right? And I think that was maybe that was before my time, but it's like a pecking order, like how many guys do you have was like important, or like a metric. And someone will say like, oh, I have 10 people. I'm like, okay, and then you do the math in your head. You're like 10 people. Let's say it's a gross charge low end of $50 an hour, 2,000 hours a year. Okay, I can kind of get a size of your business, and then they tell you how much top line revenue they did. I'm like, wow, did you?
Yeah.
Like, did you really have 10 people, or were they all half 10? Because the numbers don't add up. So just be careful. I guess the big thing is be careful when you're talking to other painters about your own head trash. This is something I ran into when I first started. Is I think we just eclipsed 2 million, and I assumed that everybody else was like a $5 or $10 million company because I was driving my Honda Elantra, and everybody else had these big, nice trucks. Right? And just having some perspective that when you're doing well, know what good looks like and what industry standard is.
And one thing I should say too, that when I take a deep dive, usually when people come to me through direct messages or something, we start diving into the numbers, they'll tell me I make X amount of net profit a year, and then 3 questions later we find out they've never actually job costed a job before. And you can sort of connect the dots saying, if you've never taken, you know, you just painted a set of kitchen cabinets, here's the revenue from there, here's how many hours I had in, here's how much the paint cost, and this is actually what I made on that job. They've never done that, but they can calculate a net profit. So just, you know, interesting data points, but I was living and dying by them for a lot of years, and I got so self-conscious. I went on these roller coaster waves of it.
Yeah.
So most painters, I actually don't know their numbers, seriously.
One of the value, I think one of the benefits of cooperation too, and Nick and I are both members of the PCA, which is a national organization, so you can get a large data set of all these painting contractors and find out like, okay, what's normal? Like, am I way off in this? Am I spending way too much on marketing? Like, what's a good marketing percentage for a high growth company or a low growth company, or for different types? Or what's a normal sales percentage to pay a salesperson, right? I can think of my own what I think, but when you start talking to hundreds of other painters and averaging out their answers, you get a much better picture.
So basically, what I put together was, the last 4 to 5 years, I've collected a lot of data from other painters, and this is what I've sort of collected, and I still need some clarification on this, but everybody refers to this as the industry standards. I don't know many painting companies that are 10 or more people that actually do this stuff, these numbers. These are, in hindsight, looking at all these numbers, these are actually really good numbers for a 10 plus painting company. We should say also that when you get below 10 painters, and especially below 5, your numbers are going to change wildly. So when we throw up industry standards and somebody says, oh my God, I'm a single person painting company, 15% of my expenses should be paint, mine is double that. Well, it's gonna be, because when you're an owner operator, that skews the entire sort of, thing up there. So below 5 painters, there's gonna be wild variations in this. And one person who can paint 30% quicker than the next single person company just made 30% more revenue with the same amount of stuff. So you're gonna see these wild swings. And especially when you have a paint company with 5 or less and you start talking about net profit, the biggest mistake that I've seen painters do is they call whatever money is left in the checking account profit. And that's not necessarily true, because what they don't take into account is paying themselves. So if you have let's say a 5-person, or in this case it's the 3-person painting company, that's an owner and 2 helpers, you don't work for free. If you had to replicate yourself, you would have to pay yourself something. And that actually goes in payroll or your fixed costs. And that's a mistake that most painting companies, when you start talking about net profit, everybody seems like they're making a lot of net profit. They're not taking out their own pay. So a true net profit is every single person in the company has been payrolled and paid, then the money left over. That's actual net profit. So that's always the next question you ask people when they say they got an ultra high net profit. Because when I hear somebody say, I got a 31% net profit, ooh, tell me more. Because if you have that secret, I want to know that. And then pretty soon you figure out they're paying themselves $20,000 a year when they should be paying themselves $80,000 a year, and then calculating. So, Jason, did I miss anything? Sorry, in there?
No, that's good. This was kind of what I was talking about with, you just look at 2,000 hours a year, and then let's call it $55 an hour revenue generated, which would, I'd argue, on the low end, expended pension kind of too. That's what you 110 kind of per person per year. So a 10-employee company should be just over $1 million in revenue, and that's where you can start to dig and prod a little bit and benchmark yourself. Where you say, how many people am I running year round, give or take? Do the numbers add up, so to speak? This was a rough cut of numbers, and these get broken down. We do budgeting starting in November, and then it gets signed off in December for our 2020 budget. So we started going through this now, and you can break this out to 100 line items, right? But big picture, again, I would say, especially as you're eclipsing this $1 million mark, you're kind of right around 40% labor. This can get broken out into washing, painting, and as you get larger and larger, you've got warranty, field management, inspections, check-ins. But general percentage is about 40% labor, 15% materials. Again, it's going to vary on, are you a super paint shop, A100 at 7-8%? Are you doing fine paints of Europe, right? We're pushing 20-25. That's going to be dependent on your labor charge rate again as well. Field management, Nick and I threw in there because how do we do that?
Well, because particularly for me, these industry standards sort of help me understand, like, the first thing I realized when I saw industry standards was all that painters care about is the cost of paint. And really what you should be worried about is the cost of labor. Because labor is always going to be at least 2 to 3 times more than the cost of paint. So, especially when we're doing the Facebook wars and you see somebody saying, oh, my Sherwin-Williams rep, they gave me a 1% increase this year. What the heck? Well, it's much easier to increase your labor efficiency or somehow find efficiency in labor and create wealth for yourself than it is with haggling over 1% of, 15% of a job.
You know, honestly, we've got, some other people have been running good business here for a long time. I'd be curious to hear from Steve or Matt or any of the other guys who've been kind of scaling for some time, or you've had a business for like a decade plus.
Yeah,
What advice would you give to people who maybe just don't have the perspective that you might have, or that you learned the hard way?
well, yeah, we've learned the hard way a couple of times, trust me. I think, looking at your numbers right here, mine are different, but I don't do an awful lot of residential redos. I do some, but most of
What
mine
is
is
your
all
market kind of
new construction. But it's super high end. So like for instance, when you're looking at the labor percentage, I struggle to keep mine under 50%.
Yeah, so
But
you
Joe.
got high paid, top notch.
Well, that and usually, unless it's raining or something, if you're doing exteriors or whatever, that kind of makes you stumble a little bit. I have to deal an awful lot with people that aren't getting their work done ahead of time. A lot of the jobs that I bid anywhere from a year to 2 years in advance. So it
You're
takes
doing
out.
like the ultra high end. People
Yeah,
don't know
like
you.
20, I've got a couple of 22,000 square foot ones going on right now. One's a remodel, another one is a new build.
You can meet Mr. Electric, probably know who he is.
So it's very difficult. Like I said, we're down 10. I mean, was it 2 years ago? I had maybe 36. Right now we're at 22. And I'm sure if you guys have more people than 5 or 6, there's always somebody going to be sick, wants a day off, car won't start. Us in the office, we're focused every single day. We're making that telephone call every day. This is where you're going to be. This is the group you're going to be with. And sometimes we've got 5 jobs and 3 crews. So it's really tough. And then all of a sudden, 7 o'clock in the morning comes around. My wife's having a baby today. Or
Yeah.
it's something. It's something. And we go, I can't believe it. I mean, I talked to Sean, who there's a reason why he's not here today.
Yeah.
So
And Sean is your production manager, right?
yeah, the office manager and everything, yeah, and he does all the scheduling and everything like that, and he goes, awesome, everybody's good for tomorrow. It's like, we don't believe it. The next thing you know, 7 o'clock, there's at least 3 people, and we've got to try and deal with that all the time. So it makes it a little bit different for us. So labor-wise, the percentage-wise, I think that's why it gets a lot higher, because our jobs get stretched.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in one for, it's gonna be 4 months now with a whole crew and partial crews going in and out of this thing for 4 months. Now I have 2 on the go. So that eats up a lot of people right there.
Yeah.
So we've really been struggling with a lot of different things, but looking at them numbers right there, my materials are up from that, but close.
You're using like oil enamels.
Oils, lacquers,
Yeah.
all different kinds of stuff like that, but it comes in, I mean, comes in gallons sometimes on some of this stuff, because we do everything. We do all the cabinetry, every single piece of woodwork that's in the place. So,
But still not,
but
but
still,
you still don't deviate all that far. I mean,
No,
if,
really,
If
no.
we're running at 45, you're at 50,
Yep.
that can make the difference between if you have 3 master craftspeople making $33 an hour, that can sometimes be the difference.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and like I say, with the 15% materials, we're anywhere from 15 to 18. But you're based off something that maybe your job is $250,000 or something, and that's where you were talking about the SKU.
Yeah.
Coming in, it's like, well, if you've got something that's a little bit cheaper and you go, well, I didn't spend that much on my materials or whatever it might be. It throws things off a little bit. I'm in my overheads, so I need 30% on every job to break even. After everybody's paid and everything like that, but my taxes, my workers' comp, myself, my 2 estimators, we throw everything into our overheads. So at 30% for us is a break-even point.
So you'd be a good guy to actually talk to about clean numbers, cause you understand that you
Yeah,
need to
we
be-
do run these things,
Yeah.
and we'll look, and somebody just tear up and go home, and we're gonna make more on the next
Try
job or
again next
something
time.
like that. You know, whatever it might be, but it's literally, it's crazy, it's all over the place sometimes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not rich, you know, I don't own my house, I had to refinance my house 3 times for people that went out of business, and I had to foot the bill for them, so these things are gonna happen. They are. The crash was my record year. Because those people had no problem with money. They didn't care at all. But the smaller ones, I still get it now, actually more so now. So now I know my numbers are getting a lot better.
Yeah.
Is that now I am getting turned down, you know, why are you twice as much as somebody else? Or why are you a third more? Or why, well, because that's what we do. You came to us, we didn't come to you.
Yeah.
I don't advertise at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, when we drive the van around, it's like, just don't know what it calls. It's
I hate
crazy
when that
because I'm
happens.
sure as you guys all know.
I guess I'd like to hear a little bit, I know Matt and Jerry are both residential repaint, I think a little bit more. You guys have a little bit more perspective, you're both fairly mature businesses. and,
Some days.
Mature business wise, not emotionally.
Yeah, not personally. I would say know your numbers. That's still probably one of my biggest faults is I kind of put my head in the sand and I don't. I kind of go off the typical, hey, is there money in the bank? But knowing the numbers of how you're paying your guys, the biggest thing is knowing where your materials are at and then knowing, okay, how much am I paying my guys or myself per hour? Because then you know, if you go into a job and you can figure out, you know your numbers, when somebody says to you, you're too expensive, you know you're not. And that's all everyone's ever gonna tell you as a painting contractor,
Yeah.
you're too expensive. They watch HGTV, they think they can do it, they put no value on it. I mean, I've probably been told 1,000 times by the man of the house, I painted in college, I know what this should cost. Great, good for you, man.
Why aren't you doing it?
Exactly. So, you know, and it comes down to if you know your numbers and you know what your value is and what your worth is. So if somebody says you're too expensive, then you can walk away from it. But we still go back when people come back to us and say you're too expensive. Where did we bid it wrong? And we know we're right where we need to be.
Yeah.
So I mean it's the fear of rejection, especially the owner operator, because you know you do a good job. You know your value. So when somebody tells you you're too expensive, you take it personally. It's not. It's the one thing. It's not. It's never
That
about you.
confidence is super important.
Right, you know, and there's so much work that Jason said, and I'm firmly, there's so much work in the state that we could all join forces and we still wouldn't even touch it.
I had a question for you guys, doing that kind of stuff. Do you change your pricing at this time of year?
No, so right now I fight with my staff every meeting about discounts. We don't do, only discounts we give is repeat customers. I call it my loyal customer appreciation, to where if I don't spend any marketing on that person, I will give them a 10% discount. Anybody new that comes in, no, this is our pricing until you work with us and kind of figure out what the expectations are.
Can I ask you a question, Ash?
Shoot.
Do you pay commissions on that sale?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't, none of the discounts affect any of our crews, anything else like that. That's just something that we do. I look at it as more of a marketing cost than anything else. I'd rather spend 10% than 20%. So,
Well, I guess the question I was trying to ask there was, the weather's changing.
Yeah,
Now-
I think it's a philosophy question. So
Okay.
I think there's obviously we're all familiar with supply and demand, okay? I went to college for 4 years, figured that out, time to read. But I've had this conversation in my office as well about, you know, it's the end of the season, we've gotten flooded with GCs from the hailstorm, who wanna get their stuff done. It's like, do we just jack up the prices and make money? And I think that's a personal philosophy decision. We've taken the stance that we've been honest.
Yeah, and I guess that's really not what I was asking either. What I'm trying to say is that now that you're outside, you're not gonna be efficient. Your days get shorter, you're working less, it's gonna start stretching your job. So what do you do when you can work 12 or 13 hours a day, getting a house done, finished, and then all of a sudden now you've got that same crew having to work for 4 days to try and get that thing wrapped up because of short hours, bad weather.
Yeah, hopefully the cost per hour is the same.
Okay.
The cost per day is not the same,
Yeah.
obviously, but hopefully the cost per hour. Cause we do 90% of our revenue April through October,
Yeah.
so we're almost all exterior, so the seasonality is very real for us. And the philosophy we've held for, when when it gets to crunch season is, let's bid it honest. Because what you don't wanna have happen is, you could probably charge this some person, you know, you bid it out 4,000, end of the year, no one else is gonna get to it, let's charge you 6, right? You can do that right now, that's gonna happen, but then they talk to their other neighbor that was 4K, they've got the same house, and now 20 years down the road, the guy that you charged $6 grand is actually a banker, you're trying to get a loan for a commercial, apartment building you're trying to build, and it's like a long-term relational and reputation thing.
Sure.
Now there's also long-term reputation and connections to being a good business person, right? Maximizing the value you can get, but it's more of a reputation and long-term relationship thing to say, you know, when we bid you in the spring, we're bidding honest. When we bid you in the fall, we're bidding honest.
Well, that's the difference. There's a difference between the spring and the fall, I guess that's what I'm saying, because you know when you're gonna get to it.
Yeah, I give people advice in the spring. Be aware that you're gonna get kind of the low prices in the spring when you're bidding. So this is something we always plan for every year. Is say we like a lot of people here have carryover. We like carryover because there's a lot of pressure in the spring. All the smaller companies that go out of business in 5 years are bidding in the spring to get work now during that time, and you kind of let them fill up their capacity, and then you can come in as a professionalized business and start bidding pretty true to your case. So if you guys are bidding, if you're new, or I would say it's a good perspective piece for anyone who does that true payment. If you're bidding in the spring, oftentimes it's a lot more price competitive because you've got the owner-operator models that are trying to fill up their capacity at a low price point. Jerry, you've been doing this for a while. You and I were talking a little bit about.
I think the numbers are, I mean, they're pretty close. I mean, it's gonna be 38, 42% on labor. You know, you can't have only high-paid guys on residential repaints. You need a couple of them that know what they're doing on everything. And you need a couple that are, you know, quote unquote, a go first if you can.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be the one that's in pulling tape and filling
This
up garbage bags.
is the average wage you need if you're gonna hit this target. Right? You'd love to pay everybody $30 an hour, right? But
Sure.
you can't. If you have everyone $30 an hour, you gotta charge a lot more, and then it start questionable.
And the 52, I think, is way low.
Yeah.
I think the market, and it's one of the things that you talk to people about is you know, this is the maximum the market will bear. There, you start reaching that point, and I don't think it's 52. I would say you start pushing 65, you're probably pushing the market. And it just depends on the clientele that you're working with.
Yeah. Good.
So I should say real quick too that when I was introduced to this, it took me about a year to fully digest this stuff and sort of kind of feel it through my business. And basically, if you think about this simply, this is basically a job cost. If you take your one cabinet job, the revenue, you figure out how much paint you used as a percentage, and then you add up your hours and the burden for those hours, and you get a labor percentage. This is accumulation of all those job costs over the year. So it starts at a micro level, and about 4 years ago, I actually intentionally started tracking all that, accumulating it, and then this stuff started making sense. And then when I passed 10 painters, this all of a sudden all snapped into focus, because these numbers were actually bore out in my business on a real thing where I could actually say, you know, I'm feeling this, and if my field management was high, you know, because that field management is basically, I hired a production manager, she takes care of that now. So if that's high or low that year, I can actually figure out that. I can feel it in my business and see it, and then make an adjustment based on that price. With 3 painters, you're sort of painting and you're field managing and you're doing this, it gets muddy, but it's much more clear when you have a structure like that. So a little perspective.
And the tricky thing too, when you're dealing with the labor, if you want to push your labor costs down, your advertising is going to go up substantially because you're going to get crappier quality work, and there goes all your referrals. So your next job you have to go buy rather than be.
Well, and then you have what Jason has, which is a warranty column in there too, and which we all have, but maybe just don't break it out, which is, you know, then what do you do with the jobs where you get the callbacks then, you know?
Yeah, and I would say there's warranty and then there's service. Kind of like we don't warranty decks, but we service them, right? We're very clear in our proposals. Horizontal services are not warranted. Does anybody else get calls for things that they clearly tell them that they don't warranty? Right?
Yeah.
And
Tell them
we
ahead
do
of
those
time.
and we often, and maybe this is a fault of ours, but we oftentimes will do them just to keep the good name in the neighborhood. Right? We're not going to tell them, well, we're clear with you. And yeah.
So questions, comments, topics, discussion? I mean, this is, yeah, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So, for example, some people, they really care about the quality of paint, and so I want my house to be done, but then there are other people that, I just want it clean. Like, do you compromise the material, or what do you say when say, like, oh, your price is too high, so I just want it clean and quick, you don't have to be very detailed about it? Or do you say that, oh, we just don't take that kind of work, or what's your response to
I'd be
the
curious to
customer?
hear, maybe from Ben, at what you speak today. Do you ever deal with that situation?
Well, I give them a choice of good, better, best. You know, like, the good is still what I put in my house, but if you wanna pay for the cashmere, the emerald, this is the X amount it's gonna cost you on top of what I quoted you at for super paint, or I use super paint, interior, flat velvet, that's just my go-to. Then, you know, I see some sure scrub, I'm not hating on sure scrub, somebody's using sure scrub, but, it just covers a lot better and it saves me more labor, just like Nick was talking.
So you
You
give
know,
them
like-
options on the product,
Yeah.
product line when they're looking for a good, better, best?
Yeah, when I do residential, and then when I do new construction, I just use super paint out of that.
Does anybody else vary either in a different way than just the materials when somebody asks?
I do, yeah, I mean, I actually had my brother's wife, all right, so, and they just bought a $1 million place on it as a cabin on Lake Minnetonka. She has a designer, the designer was very thorough, had all kinds of colors and everything had to be Chantilly lace, and of course it had to be emerald. So I did have to go back to her and explain that if you want, like what you're saying, you know, pretty much a super paint or something like that. So I had to adjust my pricing to her, she didn't care. But it's just one of those things where that was gonna be a pretty big difference on a can of paint.
Yeah.
Can you, when you bid it, tell people what it is you're gonna use and let them, if they come back and they want something else, there'll be upcharges, you let them know ahead of time?
Yeah, it depends on if they wanna choose the product.
I do all my
Well,
estimates that way.
even my stuff's all standard. It's all standard, and then from there, this is what we're gonna give you, this is what we're gonna use, and if you need anything else, there could be upcharges.
So,
You were gonna make a comment, that's why.
that was kinda how it played out.
Yeah.
So I bid most of my, because I do 90% of my work is interior repaints, walls and ceilings, right? So my standard estimate is cashmere, and then I will put a line item option underneath there to upgrade to emerald if they want to. So I put it right there, here's the price difference. It's kinda nice, usually I'll bump from cashmere to emerald, it's usually about $25 a gallon is what I'll put as a difference, so I'm actually then making another $5 a gallon or something like that, but I try to really reflect, for the most part, my cost difference in there.
Anybody have a standard markup on their materials that they charge? Or is it basically your price put in there and then labor is the thing that is?
I'm usually kind of splitting the difference between retail and my cost.
Okay.
That's kind of how I figure my materials in there, is right between retail and my
So
cost.
they're still getting a better.
It's cheaper than they're gonna get it on sale.
I think you can play games with your hourly charge rate, right? You can have a high hourly charge rate, and then materials that cost, and a low hourly charge rate, materials markup, and the percentages, you kind of figure that number out.
But to get back, kind of the original question is, I'll tell a lot of customers, if they'll say something about the product or the product cost, I'll just look and I'll say, look, I'll be honest about it, the paint's the cheap part. Like, I'm the expensive part. The
Yeah.
truck is the expensive part, and everything sitting in my truck is the expensive part. The paint's a relatively cheap part of the project. So if they're balking, well, can you use a cheaper paint? It's like, well, yeah, but it's only gonna save you $40, because we're only putting on 4 gallons, and if I go down to a cheaper paint, it's gonna save you $12 a gallon.
Well, it's a proverbial thing when you're talking with a client and the job's gonna take 10 gallons of paint and you know, you're using a paint that's $50 a gallon and they want one that's 30. It's like, well, that's gonna save you $200. The labor is way more than that to put on 10 gallons of paint. So if you're looking to get a half price job for getting a cheaper paint, you're only gonna bump it a few percentage points by getting the worst paint on the planet
That doesn't go
versus
as
the best.
fast.
Right.
And it's gonna cost more labor again too.
Yeah.
It's gonna take 3 coats of color instead of 2.
I just do the same thing where I did super paint, cashmere, and emerald, and now it's always emerald, just because one, customers like to use it. You know, it's a shiny label, everything likes it, you know, whatever. But yeah, I used to do the good, better, best, and I found that it's just easier to just offer them the best. And if they balk at it, you simply explain that, yeah, it's not a huge price difference. You're paying for the experience and the person that's putting it on the wall. You know, that paint isn't a huge thing. It's you're not calling somebody in there for that gallon of paint. You're calling them for their expertise. And
We've got about-
usually, if they're looking for that, lower, you know, I just want it to look clean, they're not. It's almost something that they should probably look at doing themselves, cause they're not looking for professionals.
Well, they're not looking for a lot of us in this room who are
Yeah.
actually thinking about our businesses, you know, and like, back to that slide, that's why we put that in there. 80% of our industry is a one-person company. That in itself is not an indication of a good or bad business, but we all know the guys who really don't wanna be painters, but since there's background checks at McDonald's, I'm a painter. You know, and that's sort of the way it goes, so.
We've got about 10 minutes. I wanna be respectful of our cutoff time, so I know a lot of people budget their day, to get out here and get to the next appointment. I guess I'd just open up to anyone on the floor that wants to ask a question to the room. We talked about kind of metric-driven production rates and getting good perspective. Obviously, you guys are the new to start your company, so it's great to get advice from other people. Does anybody else have something that they're dying to ask the group right away?
Anything you need a quick win on?
I'd like to ask, related to this, is we're trying to create like scorecards for our business and actually tracking that, like job costing, like tracking these numbers. I'd like to know more, hear from people, like how you go about that. Is there a certain time of the day you do that? Is there a certain day of the week you do that? What exact numbers, are you using an Excel spreadsheet, like the house, you do that? And how do you know, besides just knowing like how do you go about it?
Yeah. Who here's job costing and has, can kind of explain the rhythm of their process that they use?
I know this is kind of weird. All my jobs have a manila folder like this. And since it's just me, I will write down the date and the hours that I put in. And over on the side, I write down the gallons of paint and what my supplies cost. So when I get done, I know how many hours I have into it and what my material costs are.
Do you like a filing system that you
And then
keep that in?
then I
or-
keep these every year, so I put it back.
Okay.
So that's how I operate, cause it's just me.
Sure.
So.
Appreciate that.
I usually know.
Does anybody use bidding software? Epic?
Yeah,
Epic?
QuickBooks, I use.
Yeah.
And you
We
get
have,
all
we
the-
have QuickBooks
yeah.
too.
Well, you-
I was thinking like,
You should be able to get all that information if everything's input. Obviously, when all the paid bills come in, I individually, they're all put in. Your labor, you've got your time cards, we do our payroll through it, so you've got everything labeled that way. And then once the job's done, you're kinda checking on it all the time, but there is a printout that you can do, once you know all the bills are in, which sometimes can be kinda too late sometimes. You know,
yeah,
you
there's
go,
that
"Uh-oh."
issue too, like the job per
Yeah,
job, but then.
yeah, but all you can
Lots
do is,
of-
like after every, we pay on a Friday, so we get all our, time cards in on a Monday morning, they're all input by Tuesday. We have a meeting on Wednesday in the office, and we look at that, the checks haven't gone out, so we try to do that every paycheck or every pay period
Okay.
on QuickBooks and do that printout.
So you have a certain day of the week that you really look over your numbers
Yes.
and track those.
Well,
so-
look over them and share them.
Okay.
Because we're still, obviously, you know, from the paint stores, we're still getting our receipts and stuff come in.
Yeah.
So we physically do the same thing, we have big files, and tells you exactly what was on, you know, what was used on the job, who worked on the job, how long it took for priming, how long it took for woodwork, how long it took for painting the walls at the end, so we kind of try to base it out that way.
I think let's see a pretty big mix. Nick, you're gonna pull up something and show Ryan?
Yeah, so basically, this is our accumulated job costing for the year, and weekly, my production manager gets in here, and as the job's finished, every time a job finishes, you basically just write the job name, our materials used on a job, the labor here, and then it basically spits out, one of the metrics I use is revenue per hour minus materials, and then after that, we calculate percentage of labor, percentage of materials. So every job, it's either green for it passes our standard of production and quality, or it's red, and we review it every week. So there's probably, 10 to 15 jobs per week, and we go over every one and say, did I underbid it? Did I overbid it? Did we underperform? Did we overperform? Did somebody?
Are those sales conditions formatted with the color?
Yes, they are. They are. Yep.
I just-
But, I mean, this is the same thing as on the back of the thing I used to do on my estimates. I used to flip them over, revenue, here's how much paint I use, here's how many hours I am, revenue minus your paint divided by your hours, that's what you made per hour on that job. So.
If I could give some advice, I'd say ask people what they're doing, find each one, but at the end of the day, you break it down to the like fundamentals. So you have to first get the information, and then you have to record the information. And that's probably like the two components of job costing. Whether you do it weekly with the time cards, whether you're doing it on a spreadsheet, whether you've got a manual folder, those are all the methods, right, that you actually fulfill it in. But what are the fundamentals of it? And it's just like anything, like any sport, you gotta practice the fundamentals and get good at them. And how you execute that, you know, is up to your creativity, your personality, and your resources that you have.
Yeah, and I will say too that when it was me and 3 craftspeople, after every job, while the guys were loading the truck, I did this.
Yeah, you
I
should.
sat on my thing, and
Yeah.
after end of job, you're like, hey man, I think we killed it on this one. How much did we kill it? You know,
Yeah.
and you can calculate it right then. When when I'm not on every one of them, we got to do it once a week. But this is super simple to just get the pulse. You know.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, we're gonna enter into bonus time, and so what I wanted to do is say anyone that needs to leave at 1 o'clock, feel free to, because I know like myself, I'm a big planner, and if you plan to leave at 1, you can leave. We're kind of in bonus time now for anyone that wants to chat about stuff.
And Mike, if we have to go, you cut us off. Otherwise, we're
good. I built
You
in
guys,
our
you guys
cushion.
fill up the time, which is good, which means we don't have to talk about my keyboard. So bring it, ask me about it, it's okay.
cut them off now. Everybody run.